or Barry or Jan, but we'll put it all together so we can have one big group to help train everybody and have an annual expo. And you can look at that at ACO association.com as articles and bylaws with. That's the people in the health and maybe the journalists, everybody in the internet, basically. There's nobody left out. And then we've got the UFO side, UFO organization pulling together like all these old guys that Bruce suggested, AI guys, like you watch the Men in Black, and we kidded about that. But I think he came up with a good idea. But he said, call Jan Aldrich. And Barry said he'll help us what he can. Jan Maccabee. Now, that's in our district of the UFO Association up north near Chicago. We got Marta Thomas up there, and we'll be talking to Sam Monagich because Sam's all about pyramids, but he has a good firm out of Houston where I grew up. And we got Daryl Sims and the alienologists, and they're flying these people all over to do these expos, but they're doing it for gamers and people inside the internet and costumes and book sign-ins and all that. But we're going to try to start a little, hey, you want to do some good stuff and be boots on the ground while we're talking about going to space in our new space industry and try to bring it all together. So we're getting some of the old guys that are, they may or may not be an AMVETs or Barry and Jan, help me out. USO Post Office, that means civil service. But you know what I'm talking about. They may be in a town, but we can do it by state, right? Like they did in genealogy. Barry, you know about genealogists. Give us an idea of how to get this organized, because you've already seen what they did.
Well, I mean, I've only dealt with genealogists to the point of how they've unearthed a lot of press for us to use. We search for an entirely different subject matter, but the thing is that people could get involved in doing this by simply going to a local library and start pouring through old weeklies and dailies and local journals to see what they can find with regard to old aerial phenomena sighting reports. It's not a hard thing to do, but you just need a little time to spend doing it. And I don't think it really costs that much anymore either. Everything's digitized now. So if each state could muster up a few people to do that, that would be a big help. And they could forward the reports they find to central locations, or either one of us or other groups. CUFOS is still an organization, is still active. I would suggest anyone take a look at CUFOS.org, and they can see a lot of fine information on the subject that's been developed and refined over the years. So that's an immediate thing that could be done that would be useful.
Okay, so you're saying we still have some people that we can use as far as electronic information for information services. And now these organizations that have some directors left for annual meetings, do they do newsletters or monthly magazines, bi-monthly magazines?
CUFOS doesn't do a publication anymore, but they have a raft of old records posted online at CUFOS.org that I think would be very helpful and useful to people who are trying to learn how to deal with the subject.
Okay, so we'll put their link. Ed, you could John Hynek. I met him in a plane, believe it or not. I met William Tompkins in a hangar, and I met J. Allen Hynek over up in the sky. Yeah. Well, we've got to drop a bunch of names in here, Barry and Jan. Give us, I agree with you. We will promote CUFOS as a link, and possibly, do they have an RSS feed attached to their, what do they have? They have a database. They have, what do they have inside cyberspace? Do they have an office?
There's a variety of databases that you can pull from the menu that's on the main page for the site. They have historical reports, some books that have been reproduced that they had produced in the past, back issues of their journal, IUR. It stood for International UFO Reporter. and how to investigate sightings, even basic, simple things that can be done, and then it gets deep into the weeds with old reports that have long been forgotten, but they're up there and they're still fascinating even years after they've happened. You want to add anything, Jan?
Say, I heard somebody trying to get in edgewise here. One of your producers.
Okay.
Could you let him have the floor for a second?
Sure.
Yeah, that was me, TJ. Because they hit on a term, debunking, that made me want to jump in real fast and see if they had run into problems where, when you were bringing some of this information forward, such as what I did, I had saved the archive of records from the Apollo program as things that were behind the records to start making it available. And I got attacked. I got accused of everything in the world. One particular gentleman, James Oldberg, which I don't mind mentioning his name, he needs all the credit he can get for what he has been doing to try to debunk getting the truth and facts out, because my records, I have documents and everything from the government and from NASA and you name it that supported the information that I made available. What I finally did, and I kind of recommend for other people, you guys can chime in and say if this is a way to go about it, but by them going into debunking and trying to get you in a lot of people in a lot of trouble, what I did is I digitally scanned hundreds and hundreds of documents and took them to the UFO Research Center in Roswell and donated them free for them to keep in their records and archive, as well as to a couple of different universities that I'd belonged to. And that sort of stopped most of the attacks that I was getting, although when I would go overseas and give lectures and talks at conferences and events and things like that, I was really attacked good when I was over in India, and my wife didn't hear from me for 36 hours, and there was because they came behind the scene and tried to say I was a liar and that everything I was saying was not that, and I wasn't really who I said I was, and et cetera. But have you guys run into any problems like that where you're bringing up all the facts and information having to do with contact, extraterrestrials, and events and things that have taken place? I'd be very interested to see what you guys may have run into from being debunked, so to speak.
Well, now ufology has gone into, I would say, a decline. It doesn't seem as important to, I don't want to say skeptics, because I'm a skeptic. That's what I am. I'm a skeptic. I have high standards for what I believe in, and I mean, when let's say in the 80s and 90s, when PsyCop first started out, if you were interested in UFOs or something, you were a threat to Western civilization, and they actually said that a couple of times. So I've run into that, and I had this one fellow. He wrote an article. He's a skeptic, and he said, "Well, UFOs have evolved through the first they started just being like doing aerobatics, and then later on they started doing more things." And he says it's just it's a plastic phenomenon. And when I did 1947, I said, no. Almost everything that you encounter in today's ufology, you encountered in 1947. People are constantly telling me, "Oh, you didn't have any close encounters back then. It was all way off in the way far away." And I said, "No, that just shows that just looking at the record, which thousands and thousands of newspaper reports, the same thing that exists now or existed through the whole thing existed at the beginning." So
yeah, I'm thinking. So have you ever come directly and tried to discredit you based upon your experience or your credibility, your education?
Or they name calling and things like that. That's quite common.
Okay.
They don't want to argue with me because actually they think that people involved in with UFOs are ignorant and don't know history or science or things like that. And like I said, they don't want to come and argue with me or Barry because we do know history. I'm finding a lot of things. I'm finding some of the veterans organizations that are putting things from my website that involve especially the Air Force guys, that involve their pilots. They're actually quoting. They say, this guy found these things about the squadron history, and they quote me because that's what I do. I try to put up the actual documents that I found. So there's several organizations, veterans organizations, that have actually quoted my website. And I get things like this. I knew Colonel Poland. He was a fine gentleman. I see you mention him on your website, and they go ahead and tell me about their interaction with this guy during their career. That's kind of an interesting thing. So it also builds a little credibility, which doesn't hurt.
Well, that's one of the things what I was trying to get across is that between us and those that are coming forward, to get the word out to everyone who may have had experience, or may have some of the information and data that have been debunked or have been squashed in the background, and they fear the discrediting that comes with them trying to shut us up, so to speak, that by having us linked together, we get much more strength and abilities to get people to come forward and bring in more data, more documentation. That's where our advantage of forming this organization to bring in the others to help give a safe zone where people have been holding back records and information. Because in my case, I had a top secret, and we kept things absolutely silent for decades and decades, and finally, you get to the point once you've found other things, you come forward with that information. You have to deal with what kind of text, but there is a certain limit in time that I think people have to look at and say, hey, I've waited long enough, because they've just not, the government or the organizations haven't come forward in telling the truth of what we were involved in and what was happening. And it's the only thing we can do is just encourage them to get with us and come forward, and the truth shall set you free is my motto. Okay.
Yeah.
Ed, want to get involved here with what you're doing to help science?
Y'all are doing real good. Y'all are doing real good, I think.
Well,
I find it quite interesting.
The one of the best cases on it's Minot Air Force Base. It's got its own website. We spent a lot of money, a lot of traveling, and a lot of interviews, and got people that are experts in radar involved in this case and everything. But like I say, it was a B-52 case where the UFO interfered with its radio systems and followed it. And the guys at B-52 have a lot of resources, and they took pictures of the radar pictures, so those can be analyzed. And in one case, they had the UFO going over